All right. Well, welcome everybody. We are back for another amazing interview that I get to do tonight with my dear friend Peter. Uh, Peter and we've got to go on a pretty awesome journey over the last, year and a few months, just in coaching together. Peter went through the Authentic Man program and then came back for basically what we'd call as like a second round. We kind of expanded on the work that we initially started with, and it's just an awesome experience. And so, I asked Peter if he'd come back and share, more about the second part of this experience, and that's what we're here to do this evening. So, welcome. Yeah, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm really always excited to to be in a conversation with you. So thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to worry about that piece there. So, anything that you want to share about yourself with folks who might be catching this live or potentially catching it on the replay?
Ah, well, what anything that I would want to share. I'm trying to see in my mind because we did that at least. You know what we did
Hmm.
one interview. I'm trying to be like, should I be even talking about all the things that I said because someone can actually watch it in a different video.
Yeah, like,
But
oh,
yeah, but I think the what might be helpful, taking into account the main groups that both you're running and the coaching group that you're running as well that I've been part of. I think for different men there, it's probably worth mentioning that I started this work because of Dr. Glover's book. I
hmm
think that's a very, very common theme for a lot of us. I remember reading it and basically thinking that, oh, he actually wrote a book there's a book that about me that describes exactly, who I am, how I go about things and why I'm not as cool as I think I am. And like you mentioned, we did the 6-month program. I reached out to you and we did that 6-month program. And I think that really um, that really helped me to connect with who I am and with the essence and reconnect really with who I am and understand more about like what um, about how I get to over express or under express my ways of being and learn about the survival mechanisms. And I think that when we were finishing that 6 month, it felt like there was like next step to that work that I felt like I wanted to take on. And I think that we went more on the path of discovery of more of the context and content and different beliefs that were running my life and focusing on what those beliefs are, and how they affect my life and how they affect my relationship to myself and by proxy relationship to other important people in my life and the world in general. So I think that probably covers it pretty well. Um,
yeah, the audience doesn't get to learn anything about you, just
yeah, no, it's
just
just the
just the
path. It's
experience
just the
that
path
you
and the
got to have.
experience.
Yeah,
Um,
no,
but
it's
to kind of bring it back to maybe something really about me. I am Polish. I live in the US. I have a beautiful wife, two beautiful kids, and I work in a cybersecurity industry. Uh, and I am very, very interested, uh, mostly because of you. I blame you for it,
mm,
in transformation and coaching and leadership and being an ontology, really.
hmm. Yeah, I mean, and that's that's the hook of this work, is that once you start diving into it, it's pretty hard to you know get out of it in a sense, because there's endless exploration,
Mm,
in a sense. And so that's been like such a cool part to see of your journey, is this, in the, even in the beginning, you had such a curiosity of this work. Like, it didn't take
mm,
long for things to sort of start to kick in. But, as I shared with you on one of our last calls, that like you can feel the mastery of like how you're seeing things, the connections that you're making, the distinctions that you're making. Like, it felt so good, you know, like,
Mm.
and not even good from like the, oh, like my ego feels good, but like, oh, it's so
Yeah.
cool that like you're on this path, you're on
Yeah.
this journey, and you could go out into the world and speak this work to others as
Mm.
well.
Yeah. Mm. Well, I think one of the things that I mentioned to you in a text message after our last session was that I when Wednesday following our last session happened, Thursday, sorry, I'm like, oh, I need to get ready for my session with Andrew, and it kind of hit me like, oh, we're actually not going to be in a conversation. And I was like, wow, this felt so off, so weird,
Mhm.
and I think like that very much was an interesting experience, because it was like up until that point for the last year or so, I had this partner in my journey,
Mhm.
and I had someone to not only stand for me, but also hold that space for different of our explorations, and moments where I remember, we had moments where I was like crying in our session, uh,
Mhm.
and moments where we went really deep and almost into like different like traumatic events from my past. So I think there was that moment where I was like, oh, follow work. I'm actually by myself now, and I'm trying to like figure out my path in this new setting. So that was quite interesting.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah.
Well, and I think that's a great thing to even speak to, right? In that one of the foundational elements of coaching is that we're supporting a person, giving, tools and distinctions and all these pieces, but really the goal is to be able to have it so that somebody can leave the experience and really take that work and
Yeah.
go on their own.
Yeah.
And so I think that, as you're speaking to it, like, yeah, you leave that structure. It's a little nerve wracking. It's new, right? You've been in
Mm-hmm.
that structure, but I think it's a great thing even to speak to for folks who might be interested in this work or just curious, because um, from my experience, when you made the decision to complete the coaching,
Mm-hmm.
there was a specific thing that you were speaking to in terms of like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, like I feel like this is the opportunity here for me to go off and sort of like see what I can create on my own in this moment.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think this very what I described to you is that initial reaction of, stepping outside of that, certain comfort level that and zone that I created with you, and that container that we've created for a long time. And like you said, the big reason, not the big reason, the reason why I wanted to complete was really, and I remember telling you this, where I was like, I feel like all this work was for me to be able to hold myself accountable, to be able to put structures for myself, to be able to go and create things that I want to create, and do that work, and do that work, and lead that kind of work for myself. And I remember that first week was almost like, like, oh, did I make the right choice? And it was like that kind of initial, there was a bit of I think, fear that showed up there.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think it's been that transition piece from the completion, was quite interesting, and kind of just like, um, getting kind of in the flow with the new setting, new way of doing this, and really, really checking how much of what I felt ready for, I'm ready for.
Hmm.
And yeah, that was a very interesting experience in the last 2 weeks or so.
Absolutely. And it's, if you kind of look back on like, okay, when you completed the first, I'd say 6 months, but it was really more like, probably 8 months, somewhere in
Mm-hmm.
there. So what was it that you were wanting to pursue in that second part of the coaching?
Yeah,
You completed
that's.
the authentic man, and
Mm-hmm.
then like, what did you like? Why come back for more? What were you
Yeah.
kind of noticing there?
That's a great question. I think the part that you helped me distinguish as well was that I felt like there was I felt like we laid a phenomenal foundation for me to start diving more deeply into parts that I felt require more exploration, more work, and shed some more light on. And I remember thinking that there was still so much that I wanted to do with relationships, with how I my relationship to commitment, and then I think a lot of that actually thanks to some of the things that we were able to distinguish led to really a concept of self-love and the fact of like, hey, if I am not able to own certain aspect of myself, if I'm not able to understand certain beliefs that are running my life, if I'm not able to really love myself for who I am, that will have an effect on other parts of my life and relationships and how I am. And I felt like there was that new path that was created, that that first 6 to 8 months of the authentic being and the program, laid that foundation for. And I felt like that self-love was the next chapter of that journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so how did that part go? Like what was that experience like of like, okay, here's the thing that I see for myself, this aspect of diving into self-love, and
Yeah.
what were you noticing as we were going through that phase?
Yeah. So I think one of the at least to me, one of the biggest things that one of the things that impacted my way of thinking and being, outside of essence and survival mechanisms, and that part of work that we've done in the first 6 months was when I started diving into the concept of, I keep on calling it shadow work, but it's that concept of like how we project on other people the things that we either can't accept in ourselves, or how we underexpress and overexpress ourselves because of our qualities of being. And I think that shadow work, that concept of looking at other people, and instead of being annoyed and frustrated and like, oh, this moron or this asshole or this person because of this, and having all that judgment, really kind of taking a moment and looking inside about like, what is it that about that person that is triggering me, and what is it here for me to see that is for me to own that I might not own. And I think that just that simple shift of being able to catch myself in the moment when I was having a lot of judgment towards other people, and when I was like, in those human, no, typical default responses that people might have, and be like, oh, instead of like instead of allowing myself to just throw that at people, actually look at myself and see what I can distinguish for myself, allow me to realize different parts about myself, that that I didn't really have awareness around, whether that was personal towards the people that were in my life, and I could not see that the things that annoyed me in those people was really the things that I was doing as well, but I was kind of blind to it, or how that affected my relationships. So I think that was a big part of it, and just shifting that way of thinking allowed me to relate to myself and to others in a slightly different way. But that also showed me how much judgment I have, and how much judgment I have towards myself. First and foremost, I had and still do, an incredible amount of, or I uncovered that I had incredible amount of feelings that I'm not worth and worthy, and really understanding that that's the case, and then loving myself for the fact that I am worthy. I am allowed to have things. I'm allowed to ask for things, And when the judgment shows up, it's okay for the judgment to show up, but also at the same time, in that moment, to be able to catch myself and actually love myself and give myself some grace. Those were the sort of things that really were driving that whole chapter of our work. So the big title was the self-love, but underneath that, it was all about the beliefs, the parts of me that I could not or did not want to integrate, the parts that I really didn't know that I hate about myself or don't love about myself, and really trying to uncover that and integrate even more of that, and start relating to myself first and others in a completely different way.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for anybody that's watching, I can speak to this, because I don't even need to explain it. So one of the elements that Peter's speaking to is, this work around survival mechanism and understanding, how do we relate when we come from fear or egos or anxiety, and how that impacts our world. And so that's some of the work we initially dove into. And then um, Peter actually dove into a book called The Dark Side of the Light Chasers from Debbie Ford. And I will say, Peter, like, you can just tell from what you took away from that book, like it's a real deep dive into that shadow work. And even the way that you're speaking to it, like um those projections that are like those things that we see in others that we can't be with ourselves, right? Like that's a huge concept,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
us to be able to be with. And then, really, really cool to hear you just speak about, like, noticing the beliefs, noticing the judgment that's in the space. Um, yeah, just it does take me back to our conversations around that, right? And just really noticing, like, oh, like the judgment that's in the space. Um, yeah, really, really cool. So, and I'm curious, from this experience of coaching and this work that we did together, you know, how do you see this work, maybe differently than you did when you first started?
Yeah. Huh. I think at the beginning, and I touched on that in our other interview, so I'm not going to be really diving too much into it. But I think at the beginning, a lot of that was I was looking to you for answers to my problems, and I think that's like it is very, I think, natural in this day and
Hmm.
age to be kind of like, oh, tell me. I mean, it's like if that's bad, then what's the good? And I think a lot really, that I experienced and learned as part of our work was to really start trusting my own wisdom and carving my own path, and really looking for those answers in myself, and more using you as an opportunity to find those answers, and not really asking you to give me them.
Hmm.
And so that wisdom piece is, I think, also a bit of a byproduct of not trusting myself and really
Hmm.
reconnecting with that trust piece, of and I think that it was, the amount of times you actually reflected that to me, the trust piece, and the fact that I'm looking, kind of when you were reflecting back to me what I've just been talking about, that I
Mm.
still was finding my ways not to trust the space, not to trust myself, and still trying to somehow get you into like telling me what I should actually do. That was a very interesting, dance, let's say, that we did for a lot of sessions. But I think like that kept on, you kept on modeling that thing for me as well, and that led me to that understanding that everything I need to figure out my path, is somewhere in me, and I just need to, I just want to, and those answers are there, and I just need to find them.
Hmm. I mean, that's the one of the cool things about a space like this, is that there is spaciousness in the conversation. There's a chance
Mm-hmm.
to actually just be with your thoughts, be with your heart,
Yeah.
and really just sit with like, hey, what is here for me? And as you mentioned, like in the beginning, often it's a desire to get the answers, move quickly,
Yeah.
get to the goal line, as
Yeah.
quick as possible. And you can speak to this as well, but inevitably, like it starts to sort of slow down a little
Mm-hmm.
bit, and
Yes.
in some senses, like the conversations get deeper. They may even
Mm-hmm.
get more challenging, but like there's just that opening, and
Yeah.
as you mentioned, like the trust starts to come through and the
Yeah.
wisdom starts to come through. So,
Yeah.
um, I appreciate you like reflecting back like the space that's been created. But I mean, again, I would also say that that's really generated from you,
Mm.
over that time period.
Mm. Uh, Thank you. Um, there is one thing I wanted to because you made me realize something that I
Mm,
wanted just to add to that how normal is to be confused in this work, and how
mm-hmm,
normal is to trust yourself during that confusion, that confusion is not only a normal part of the process, but something that will actually lead you, somewhere. I really can't even count the amount of times that we were sitting there and I was like so confused that I had no idea where are we going, what are we doing, what's even the point of what I just discovered. And then somehow magically, because of the space, because of the conversation, because of the awareness that was created, or because of just that wisdom, some things just in a matter of days, weeks started
mm-hmm.
just showing up. And I think that that's something, especially if someone who is interested in this work is listening, is that it's so good to be confused, in this work, because that usually is a good sign.
It's a funny like selling point, like,
Yeah.
hey, you go on this journey, you're going to be confused. It's
uh,
going to be challenging,
uh,
but it's true, right? And that's the beauty of it is like going at your pace.
mm-hmm.
Yes, there's going to be challenges and things that you get confronted with, and probably reflections made that you may not have ever heard before.
Yeah.
But like I think that's the beauty of it too, is that it's all sort of on a gradient.
Mm-hmm.
That you know I would say the transformational side of this work is that like you know that sometimes, yes, there are moments where you get sort of pushed
Yeah.
over into the deep end, but there are other times where it's like, no, like let's slow things down. We don't
Mm-hmm.
need to rush.
Yeah.
You'll find your way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, So we got a question here. We unfortunately can't see names on this platform that we're on sometimes. So if you're still here and you want to put your name in the chat, you can with your question. But you said, so I think you may have answered this, Peter, but
Mm-hmm.
how did you develop the ability to stop yourself and realize you were being judgmental of others and yourself?
Hmm. That's a beautiful question. So I think what I would highly recommend is to read the book, that Andrew mentioned, and that the one that I call shadow work. But because there's a number of practices there that help at least create awareness of what to be on the lookout for. And those can be simple things, and I think that's where I started. I was like, made a conscious decision that this week, I will look for moments where someone annoys me, or someone frustrates me, or I'm just like, about to punch someone in the face. And I think that, like, in the moment, and sometimes I wasn't able to catch myself in the moment, but it was like, oh, I was so annoyed today. And then I was like, why was I annoyed? I was annoyed because that person, that moron, that thing happened, whatever. That idiot said this thing, or this guy did this. And then I was like, oh, look, that's exactly the sort of thing you're looking for this week. So is there something for me to look at? And I think that the super difficult part about that is, at the beginning at least, is that sometimes things don't come easy. Like, I think it took me with a certain person, it took me probably like 5 or 10 or even 15 times before I realized that, like, oh, I'm getting annoyed with that person's, inability to stay to his word and commitment. That person keeps on committing, keeps on not delivering, keeps on promising they will, and they don't do that. And then I realized it's like, I do exactly the same thing in this part of my life. I do exactly the same thing in my relationship. I do exactly the same thing with my wife. I keep on telling her I'll do things and I don't. And I keep on promising I will and I don't. And I was like, oh, there you go. Hello. And it was, I think it was at the beginning, it's like even catching myself after the fact was super valuable, just to start building when it's like, okay, there is something for me to look at. And I think another thing that I found really useful was to think about the type of traits or the type of things that I always hated in people, or didn't like in people, like selfish, or kind of think about people that I like. Even to this day, I just like, well, I used to work with this person, hate him, or he did this, or he, and then kind of like actually start writing on the piece of paper, what is it, the thing that person that I'm judging that person for, and then really start looking about, like, is there a place in my life where I do that, or what I feel like that towards someone else? And I think that over time became a little bit easier. But that still is an extremely hard work, and that still is something that I keep on doing. It's I think I had like a random revelation the other day when I was driving, that it completely hit me out of nowhere, that that's something that I been seeing that was triggering to me for a long time. I couldn't actually find what was the where I see it in my life, and it just kind of came to me, out of nowhere when I was driving, and I was like, kind of like, oh, there it is. So I think those are the practices or ways how I personally found it useful to do that work.
Absolutely. And, a couple of things that I would add to that is, like, for those that are listening, notice the intention that you brought to that, Peter. Like, you actually put practices in place to move this forward, right? Starting with just being aware, just starting to practice that awareness. I seem to recall too that we actually made a practice where you did like some reflection, I think, for a week or two at the end of the night, just to like,
Yes.
hey, were there
Yeah.
any occasions where this came up? And so, like, you practiced in different ways.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that I would just add into that too, very much aligned with what Peter said, was like, okay, so you're asking, like, how do I develop the ability to stop myself and realize when I'm being judgmental of others? This is actually accepting that you're a judgmental person.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, it's I would say easy, not easy, but one of the things that happens in this work is we actually name a survival mechanism. We name, so a coach would actually go through an exercise with you in this work, and they would name sort of those shadow qualities of yours. And so one of mine, I think I've shared this with you before many times, but one of mine was the righteous loser. So you can't forget it. You see it. You see it in your life. And but the thing is, you don't even need to have the name. It's just starting to realize, like, oh, you think that person's selfish? You think that person's judgmental or, angry?
Yeah.
Is totally fine to think that, but also recognize that those qualities are probably within you as well.
Yeah.
And so just realizing, like, we all have these qualities, that's a great pathway to just starting to open this up a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because I definitely find that now where, yeah, people still piss me off all the
Yeah.
time. But, it is
Normal.
cool when you're driving down the road and somebody is, hopefully not being aggressive to you on the road, but, just you can kind of have some empathy for that person and be
Yeah.
like, oh, hopefully they're okay,
Yeah.
like, and realizing those things. So great question. So as we start to kind of wind down here, I would love to hear, like, what do you see as next for yourself? As you step out of this container, and I know you're stepping into a new container and just
Mm-hmm.
stepping out into new aspects of life. Like, what do you see for yourself?
Yeah. So like you mentioned, I am stepping into a new container. I decided to start the work with the Forge this year, and as part of that work, and also kind of future plans. I think the big reason for that work was about developing my leadership. And I think the part that speaks to me the most about the work is that it's all about like doing the work first. So, realizing all those beliefs, all those judgments, all those ways, all those things that get in the way, and then doing that work first to understand what it means to go through that, and be able to model that to others, and be able to build that in and lead others. So I think that's something that I'm undertaking now, and excuse me, and we'll be focusing on. I think the when we were completing our work, there was still the big work for me on the self-love project and actual implementation of that project. And I did want to spend a second on the project piece, mostly because of the question that was just asked, but also kind of the conversation about like how much exploration we've done. I think to me, the project work was extremely difficult, and I had so much resistance, and still do. And I think I felt very safe in the space with you to do a constant exploration. And I could have done, we could have done it endlessly, but I was shying away from any sort of like commitment project and work where you actually kind of bring that exploration slash working, with your feelings, emotions, and kind of like have to put something on paper and be like, okay, within X of amount of time, I am going to do Y, and I'm committing to that. And I think the amount of resistance and the amount of things that showed up for me in trying to define a project for myself was also a good way of actually seeing triggers for me, like, oh, maybe there's a problem with commitment that I have. What's my relationship to commitment? And that tool in of itself became like a great way to discover different things about myself, and expand on the work, both as part of self-love, both as part of the shadow work. So I think the big thing for me is really to continue on that project work and deliver on that project work based on my vision, based on my objectives, and what I want to achieve. And that project is simply titled self-love. It's basically a way for me to be able to influence my relationship with myself and relationship with others, and be exactly as I am, as I want to be, and be myself in with myself and with others. And I think those are the two big pieces. Now, the third piece, and I think this was also the kind of tying back to the Forge and some of the work that we've been doing, especially when it comes to leadership and modeling, is on the fact that it connects very much professionally with for me, because one of the things that I see as part of my work is I started seeing extreme amount of connection between what happens with transformational coaching and the amount of resistance people might have, and what happens to me in my line of work. Because right now my line of work is focused more on the business transformation within the cybersecurity space. And I think that when you start bringing, when you start seeing the resistance, you start seeing the people not enrolling into possibility, you start seeing people needing support to actually be able to understand, their own wisdom in that whole situation, and be able to understand what the best path might be. And especially when you bring something new, everyone is always afraid. or people are usually afraid. So I think a lot of the work that I'm focusing on in that leadership container in the Forge is really about developing those skills, so I can also employ that in my line of work and be able to help those businesses transform, and those individuals behind decision makers behind those changes to really be able to be supported properly as part of that work. So those are the big areas that I'm focusing on. And I think the last byproduct of the Forge and that work is the coaching piece. So the fact that, like, that one of the skills that they hone on is the coaching. So I do see some opportunities maybe to do that work in a little bit more of a pro bono kind of giving back type of a way to support men or anyone really, but to I mostly said to support men because I kind of remember my path, and and just based on some of the groups that we're both in, I feel like there's so much good work that could be done. So that's really where my mind goes, but that part is really kind of undefined right now. It's more of a we'll really see what will come out of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's so cool to see that like intersection between like the transformational work and the business side of things, right? Because oftentimes they're kind of seen as like separate. Like you either go the business route and that's the pathway to follow, or you be on the spiritual side. And that is, even if we bring that back to that piece around project design, or projects, that is truly what this work is about at the deepest level, is that we are shifting the being, how we relate to the world. And oftentimes if it just stays in that space, it's sort of one dimensional, right? You can see examples of this in the world where people will sort of be like, hey, I'm in this spiritual place, and because I'm here, like I don't need to take action or make money or any of those things. And for some people they don't.
Yeah.
But the real gift is, can you play in the spiritual plane? Can you play in the transformational space? And from that, still take the highest actions. Still, truly create the life by design that you desire to have. And as a byproduct of that, be an example for others. So it's great that you're sharing that, and like what a gift that's going to be for the people that you get to come into connection with.
Oh, I hope so. Thank you.
For sure. Well, thanks so much, for being willing to do this. Anything else you want to share before we wrap this conversation up for tonight?
Let me see. I think I'll just put out an invitation, similar to how I did last time. But I did want to make sure that that's being said again. This work with you has been life-changing. And I think that the part that, even now with the Forge, with the leadership, exploring that coaching part, like that speaks truly to the essence and who I feel I am, and also how I can give back, and kind of what my life purpose is, and not how I kind of just fell into something that I just became really good, professionally, because it's just easy to just stay in that kind of way of life. And I feel like I've uncovered things that were completely unavailable for me. And that wasn't anything that I was planning, right? When we were starting this work. So I think this is more of an open invitation to anyone that, as challenging as this is, as difficult as this is, as hard as hard to sell to someone the real benefits of transformation work are, in terms of when you say to people, oh, you'll be confused, it's a lot of hard work, you will feel uncomfortable. Like, there's no good way to really say it to make someone be like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I need in my life. it's also worth it. Because I think just at least being on the path to understanding who you are and who you want to be in this world, and really being courageous enough to go and do it. That's what this is. I think that's why we're here. At least I hope that's why we're here. So if there's anyone listening, I would just say that if you're kind of like thinking about reaching out to Andrew or another coach, and you're kind of like, yeah, maybe not, and finding 50 reasons why not to, just do it. Just find something in you and send that email, get in the conversation, because you will probably not regret that once you give that a chance.
Thank you for sharing that. And I mean, you are just a shining example of what can be created from this work. Like you said, it's we didn't know necessarily where this journey was going to go, and I think that that's the most fun of it, is that it's truly a creative experience. And yeah, it's I look back on the time that we got to work together, and like I just have joy because I got to grow just as much in the experience with you, but to see what you've created, and um, just who you are, it's so cool. It's so fun to watch. And with that, I would love to actually give you some acknowledgement if you are open.
I would love to receive some acknowledgements, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I mean, just to kind of continue on that thread, I really want to acknowledge you for the being of who you are. From conversation number one to where we are now. I mean, it's just been so cool to see your journey, to see, what you've created, who you're being, how you're connecting with people, how you're, connecting with your wife, your family. Um, it's just like it's an amazing experience to watch and be a part of, and just like see you do that. I really want to acknowledge you for the courage that you brought, and even if I actually put my focus to the last 6 months, the real allowing of the deepening, the allowing of the exploration of like what is truly at the core of what I desire, and um, doing that deeper work to see what opens up. And um, it's so amazing to see like how you interact, what you're creating, what the possibilities that are next for you. And the beauty of that is that it's all just coming from your creation. Your being is the source of that. So yeah, thank you for taking on this experience, and thank you for like continually showing up and just being a yes to this work, because it's pretty amazing watching what you're doing.
I'm taking it all in. Thank you, Andrew.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. We will wrap up here. Folks, if you guys have any questions at all that you want to ask either of us, please feel free to reach out. You can do it through this post or reach out to either of us, and we're happy to answer your questions. Yeah, so thanks, Peter. And yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Bye for now.
Thank you, Andrew.